The next few days passed quietly, almost too quietly, like our home was holding its breath. After months of painful revelations, arguments, and raw truth, it felt strange to wake up without chaos pressing on my chest. I wasn't healed, not even close, but I wasn't drowning anymore. One evening, I was sitting on the stairway landing with my legs pulled to my chest, looking through one of Dad's old notebooks. He wrote everything down: reminders, grocery lists, small messages to himself. But in between the scribbles were things that felt like little pieces of his heart. There was one line I kept reading over and over. If something happens to me, I hope Nora and her mother hold on to each other. They'll need each other more than they realize. My eyes blurred. He always knew how fragile the world could be. And he'd been right. We needed each other. We'd just forgotten how to show it. Mom came down the stairs slowly and paused when she saw me. "You okay?" I nodded and held up the notebook. "He wrote this." She sat on the stair beside me, leaving a small gap between us. "Your father always believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves." I leaned my shoulder lightly against hers. It wasn't much, but it was something. She smiled through tight lips. "We should visit him soon," she said softly. "It's been a while." "I know," I whispered. "I'm ready now." The next morning, we drove to the cemetery with Aunt June in the back seat. The sky was bright but soft, the kind of day where nothing felt rushed. The entire drive, I imagined Dad sitting with us, laughing at Mom's old stories, telling me to buckle my seatbelt properly. When we arrived, I carried the flowers, white lily and yellow roses, his favorite. Mom walked slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Aunt June stayed behind us, giving us space. We stood in front of the headstone in silence. Michael Hunt, a father, a husband, a friend. Our home was built on his love. Mom knelt first, touching the stone with a gentleness only grief could teach. "Michael, we're trying. We're trying so hard." Her voice cracked but didn't break. I placed the flowers down and whispered, "Dad, I miss you every day. But I'm learning how to keep going." We stayed there for a long time, not talking, not crying, just breathing beside the place where love and loss shared the same soil. After a while, Mom reached for my hand. I let her take it. We walked back to the car in silence, but it wasn't a heavy silence. It was the kind that settles after a storm. That evening, Mom called me into the living room. She held her journal, flipping through the pages until she found a particular one. She handed it to me. "This is something I wrote," she said, "before everything came out." I read it quietly. I'm afraid of what Nora will think of me. She sees me as strong, steady, unshakable, but I feel like a cracked wall pretending not to crumble. If she ever knew how scared I am, I don't know if she'd still love me the same. My throat tightened. "Mom, I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to be honest." She gave a small, aching smile. "I know that now." I took her hand. "Are you still thinking about Clark?" She exhaled slowly. "Less and less. And if he comes back?" She shook her head. "Only after you and I are whole again. Only if it doesn't harm us. Only when we're both ready." I nodded. For the first time, it didn't scare me. Later that night, we sat together on the balcony with hot cocoa and warm blankets. The city lights glowed below us, a reminder that the world kept moving even when our small corner felt frozen. "Mom," I said quietly, "I don't want us to be afraid of talking anymore." "Neither do I," she whispered. "So let's promise something." "Okay." She took a deep breath. "If I'm ever scared or confused or hurting, I'll talk to you. Before anyone else." I swallowed. "And if I'm ever angry or lost or disappointed, I'll talk to you too." She smiled, eyes shimmering. "Then we'll be okay." "Yeah," I whispered. "We will." For the first time since Dad died, I believed that. Maybe we would never be the same. But maybe we could be something new, something honest, fragile, strong, and real. A family that survived the unthinkable. And still chose each other. The next week felt like a new chapter. Not perfect, not healed, but gentler. The kind of quiet that comes when two people finally stop running from each other and start facing the truth together. Mom and I settled into a rhythm. We cooked dinner together again. We watched old movies Dad loved. We talked about normal things like school, work, and what to plant in the small backyard garden that had been untouched since he passed. But the truth was, there were still shadows. Grief isn't something you bury and walk away from. It hangs around, waiting in the corners. And healing doesn't come in a sudden wave, it arrives in small, uncertain pieces. One evening, after washing dishes, Mom came to my room. She paused at the doorway. "Can I come in?" I sat cross-legged on the bed, notebook in hand. Yeah, she closed the door gently and joined me on the edge of the bed. She ran her thumb along the comforter like she was choosing her words carefully. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "What is it?" "I want us to do something in your father's honor. Something that belongs to both of us." I tilted my head. "Like what?" She looked down at her hands. "A memory dinner." "A what?" "A night where we cook his favorite dishes. Tell his stories. Invite the people who loved him. Not sad, not heavy. Just a night that brings him back into the room." I stared at her. I didn't know if I was ready, but the way she said it, soft, hopeful, fragile, made me think maybe we needed this more than we realized. When I asked, "Saturday. It's soon." "I know," she said. "But waiting too long makes things harder." She was right. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's do it." By Saturday morning, the house smelled like fried chicken, sweet rolls, and baked macaroni, the things Dad always asked for. Mom moved around the kitchen with a quiet confidence I hadn't seen in months. Aunt June came early, bringing drinks and a photo frame. When she hugged me, she whispered, "Your father would be proud of you." I didn't trust my voice enough to answer. As evening approached, a few close friends of Dad's arrived, old coworkers, neighbors, people who had been part of his everyday world. I realized how much of his life I didn't know, how many stories lived outside our home. Mom dimmed the lights slightly. Soft music played in the background. People filled their plates and sat around the living room. Someone asked, "Should we say something about Michael before we eat?" Mom stiffened just for a second. I reached for her hand and she took a breath before stepping forward. "You all know how much he loved this house," she said. "He always said home wasn't built with bricks, but with stories, laughter, family." Her voice trembled, but she didn't fall apart. "Tonight isn't about loss. It's about remembering how he lived. How he loved." The room softened. Then she looked at me, eyes full of trust. "Nora, do you want to say something?" My heart raced. I wasn't good with speeches. But I walked to the center of the room holding the small notebook Dad kept. "He wrote everything down," I began. "Even simple things. Grocery lists, reminders, and sometimes pieces of himself." I swallowed hard. There's something here that stuck with me. I read the line aloud. "If I don't get the chance to grow old, I hope the people I love remember that I gave them everything I could." A few people wiped their eyes. I lowered the notebook. Dad didn't leave us confused. He didn't leave us empty. He left us full. Full of memories. Full of love. Full of examples of the kind of people we should try to be. I heard Mom sniff quietly. "And even though it hurts," I continued, "I'm proud that we're still here. Still trying. Still holding on." A gentle wave of warmth filled the room. For the first time in a long time, the air wasn't heavy. It was tender. People shared stories, the kind that made us laugh, the kind that made us tear up, the kind that reminded us that Dad had lived a real, meaningful life. Mom and I stood side by side, plates untouched, listening to piece after piece of the man we loved. Not the man who died. The man who lived. Later, after everyone left and the house had grown quiet again, Mom sat beside me on the couch. "You were brave tonight," she said. "So were you." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think he'd be proud of us?" I nodded. "Yeah, I really do." And for the first time since he left this world, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace, not perfect. Not complete. But real. And real was enough. I didn't see my mother for 2 days after that night. She left early each morning, returned late at night, and moved through the house like someone walking through a hotel she didn't book. No greetings. No small talk. Not even the minimal warmth she used to offer when she was annoyed. She had stepped into a version of herself I didn't recognize, clean, polished, organized, and distant. The kind of distant that made you feel like a visitor in your own home. On the afternoon of the second day, I stood at the balcony overlooking the neighborhood. The sun hung low, bright and warm, and the sound of children playing on the street echoed upward. But I felt none of that warmth. I felt hollow, like I was watching life from behind a window no one else could see. When my phone buzzed, I almost ignored it. But then I saw the name. Uncle Henry, my father's younger brother. The only person besides me who still said Dad's name like it mattered. I picked up. "Child," he said, his voice thick with concern. "You sound tired." I swallowed. "I'm fine." "You're lying," he said gently. "Your voice carries your father's spirit. It cannot hide truth." I blinked, tears blurring my view of the street below. He sighed. "I'll come tomorrow. We need to talk." Before I could respond, he added, "And before you argue, yes, your mother knows I'm coming." He hung up. I stared at my phone, confused. Why would she agree to that? She had avoided every conversation related to Dad since day one. So why allow Uncle Henry to visit now? That night, I heard her talking on the phone again. Quiet, low, intentional. But this time, I stepped closer to her door and listened. "Yes, I've already made the decision," she whispered. "I'll tell her soon." A pause. "I know, but she's strong." And she adjusts. My breath caught. Adjust to what? I whispered to myself. When she ended the call, I hurried back to my room, sliding under my blanket like I had been there the whole time. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the gate opening. I rushed to the living room and found Uncle Henry entering with his usual gentle stride. He hugged me tightly, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "You've grown thinner." I forced a smile. "I'm okay." He studied my face. "Tell me the truth later." When my mother appeared from the hallway, everything inside me tightened. She looked composed. Too composed. Like someone who had made peace with whatever decision had been sitting on her chest. "Let's sit," she said. Uncle Henry exchanged a look with me, one filled with warning and reassurance at the same time. When we all settled, she folded her hands and stared at them instead of us. "I've been thinking a lot over the past few months," she began. "And I've realized that holding on to the past won't help us heal." Uncle Henry straightened, but said nothing. She continued, her voice steady but distant. "I've accepted a job offer." I frowned. "A job? Where?" "A school in another city." The room shifted. My heartbeat stumbled. "Another city?" I repeated, my voice barely audible. Uncle Henry leaned forward slowly. "Which city?" She inhaled. "Port Harcourt." My breath stopped. "That's hours away," I whispered. "I know," she said. "So you're leaving?" I asked. "Not leaving," she replied calmly. "Relocating. For a fresh start." My chest tightened painfully. A fresh start for who? She finally looked at me. "For all of us." "Except Dad?" I said, my throat burning. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My mother exhaled sharply. "He's gone. We have to move forward." Uncle Henry's jaw tightened. "Moving forward is not the same as running away." "I'm not running," she fired back. "I've given this family everything. I lost myself in the process. Now I want something different." I stared at her, searching her face for even a flicker of guilt, of hesitation. Anything, but she was stone. Cold, polished as stone. "What about me?" I asked. "You'll come with me," she said simply. Of course. But the softness she meant to use didn't land. Because it wasn't softness. It was finality. Uncle Henry leaned back, stunned. I broke. "So 3 months after Dad died, you're choosing a new life?" She blinked, guilt flickering for the first time. Then, softly, "Yes." The word felt like a blow to the chest dot, and in that moment, everything changed. The day we left for Port Harcourt felt heavy, like carrying a bag full of invisible stones. Every corner of the house whispered Dad's presence. His old coffee mug on the counter, the chair he always sat in by the window, the photo on the mantel. Even the air seemed unwilling to let us go. Mom moved through the rooms with quiet efficiency, checking that nothing was left behind. Her expression was calm, measured, the calm of someone who had already decided. But in her eyes, I caught glimpses of something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not fear of the move, but fear of the unknown. Of a life without the familiar, without Dad, without the town that had held us together for so long. I trailed behind her, dragging my small suitcase. The silence between us was thick, but it wasn't heavy. Not yet. It was more like the space before a storm breaks. Once in the car, Aunt June waved us off, her eyes glistening. "Take care of each other," she called. "And remember, we're always here." I didn't respond because words failed me. I watched her small figure disappear behind the gate. The finality of it pressing down on me. Mom turned her face to me, her lips tight. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. Not because I was, but because I had no choice. The drive was long. The scenery changed from familiar streets to highways I'd never traveled. We passed markets with colorful stalls, roadside children chasing stray dogs, and towns that seemed to hum with life. Life Dad would have loved. The life we were leaving behind. Mom kept her hand on the gear shift, eyes fixed on the road. I looked out the window, tracing the outline of the clouds, and thought about Dad. I thought about the last time I saw him lying in the hospital bed. The faint lines of his face etched with worry, love, and exhaustion. I thought about how he always carried us forward, even when he was weak, even when he was tired. And I realized we had to carry him forward now. The city welcomed us with its heat, traffic, and neon signs. Our new apartment was small, modern, and stark. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal. It was a clean slate, but it felt like stepping into a room where Dad's spirit had yet to reach. I felt his absence everywhere. Mom set down her suitcase and turned to me. "This is our home now. I know it feels empty, but we'll fill it together." I forced a smile, though my chest ached. Okay, for the first few days, we unpacked silently. We tried to make the apartment feel like home. I arranged Dad's notebook on the small shelf by my bed, just like it had been in our old living room. Mom cooked his favorite meals, even though he wasn't there to taste them. She smiled sometimes, but it was fragile, like porcelain teetering on the edge of a shelf. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Mom called me to the balcony. The horizon was ablaze with orange and pink light, reflecting off the windows of the distant buildings. She held out her hand. "Dance with me," she said. I blinked. "Dance?" "Yes, not for anyone else. Just us. Just to remind ourselves that we can still feel alive." I hesitated, then stepped closer. The music from my phone filled the small balcony. Slowly, we moved, uncoordinated at first, then in rhythm. I rested my head against her shoulder, and she held me tightly. In that moment, I saw her not as the mother who had chosen a new life, but as the woman who had survived grief and was daring to breathe again. And I saw myself not as the child trapped in sorrow, but as someone who could let go just enough to walk beside her. She whispered, "I can't replace him. And I never will. But I can keep moving forward. And I hope one day you can forgive me for the timing." I pulled back slightly to look at her. "I don't need to forgive you. I just need to understand, and I think I do now." Her eyes filled with tears, and I realized we were both letting go of guilt, of anger, of the past that had kept us bound. The pain didn't disappear. It never would. But it no longer had the power to control us. We stayed on that balcony until the stars appeared. We didn't talk much after that. Words weren't necessary. The silence between us was full of understanding. Full of love, full of the promise that even after loss, life could be embraced again. That night, as I lay in bed with Dad's notebook beside me, I understood the truth the title had whispered all along. 3 months after my father's death, my mother chose another life, and in choosing her life, she didn't abandon me. She chose us. We were alive. We were grieving. But we were together. And somehow, together was enough. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep feeling the quiet comfort of hope, knowing that the storm had passed and that the dawn of our new life had truly begun. Days turned into weeks, and the city of Port Harcourt slowly became more than just unfamiliar streets and noisy markets. It became a canvas, a place where Mom and I could paint our new lives, piece by piece. The apartment, once sterile and cold, began to carry warmth. My father's photos remained on the shelves, silent witnesses of a life that had shaped us. But the rest of the space started to breathe with our presence. Mom had begun her job at the school. She returned in the evenings with papers to grade, schedules to plan, and a careful pride in her posture. Gone was the fragile woman who had barely slept in grief. In her place was someone cautiously rebuilding her world. And I, in my own way, started discovering the rhythm of this new chapter: school friends. Quiet walks along the riverside, afternoons spent sketching in my notebook, memories of Dad scribbled in margins. One Saturday morning, Mom and I decided to explore the neighborhood together. The sun hung high, bright and unrelenting, casting everything in sharp, golden clarity. Market stalls lined the streets with fruits, spices, and vibrant fabrics. Children ran past us laughing, vendors called out in melodic chatter, and the scent of fried plantain drifted through the air. For the first time, the vibrancy of life didn't feel like a mockery of grief. It felt like an invitation. "Do you remember when we used to walk through Dad's market back home?" I asked, holding Mom's hand loosely. She smiled faintly, a flicker of nostalgia in her eyes. "I do. You used to insist on buying roasted peanuts even though you hated them." I laughed softly. "I wanted to, but only because he always bought them for you." Mom's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. Instead, we moved forward, letting the noises of the street fill the silence between us. When we returned home, I found Dad's notebook on my bed. I opened it and discovered a new layer of his thoughts. Little things. He had written down about the future he dreamed for me and Mom, lines about bravery, kindness, and finding joy even when the world felt heavy. I carried the notebook to Mom in the living room. "Look at this," I said. "He always believed we could handle change, no matter how hard it was." She looked over my shoulder and traced the words with her finger. "He wanted us to live, even if he couldn't be here." I nodded. "And I think we're starting to—" Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "Yes, we are." The days became routine. Weekday mornings filled with the bustle of Mom's school and my classes. Evenings with cooking together, homework, and quiet conversations on the balcony. The apartment slowly transformed into a home, not because it was perfect, but because it was ours, a living testament to our grief, our resilience, and the choices we made to keep moving forward. Then came the weekend. I wasn't prepared for a small celebration at the school for Mom's achievements. I had been invited as her guest. Walking into the hall, surrounded by her colleagues and students, I realized something profound. People weren't just seeing Mom, they were seeing the strength she had cultivated in our absence, the life she had chosen despite everything she had lost. I watched her laugh with ease, her hair shining in the sunlight streaming through the windows, her voice strong and confident. And I understood that choosing another life didn't mean abandoning the past. Choosing another life meant creating space for joy, growth, and love again. A life where she could still be my mother, still honor my father, and still embrace her own happiness. That evening, as we walked back to our apartment under the amber glow of streetlights, Mom held my hand tightly. "I know it hasn't been easy," she said softly, "but we're learning, together, and one day this will feel like the life we were always meant to have." I smiled, leaning into her. "It already feels like a start. And I think Dad would be proud." Mom nodded. "He would. And I promise we'll keep him alive in our hearts every single day." That night, I placed the notebook beside my bed. I closed my eyes and finally allowed myself to feel the mixture of grief, love, and hope. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest felt manageable. It wasn't gone, but it had been shared between us, my mother and I, stepping carefully into a new life that still carried the echoes of the one we had lost. In the quiet of our apartment, under the soft hum of the city, I whispered to the shadows of the past, "We will survive. We will thrive. And together we will be okay." And for the first time, I truly believed it.